Welcome to the Checkered Shorts Podcast, a podcast of three fraternity brothers reconnected by their love of IndyCar. Join us for GridRival IndyCar Fantasy Talk, predictions for upcoming races, and reactions to race day results and all things IndyCar. Let's go racing.
Let's go.
Hey, welcome back to the Checkered Shorts Podcast, a podcast where three fraternity brothers get together, talk all things IndyCar. And we are on episode 3, and this is our reaction race, just following the race. Today, the three of us to kick off the 2025 season got together at Pat's house, had a wonderful time there, gracious host. So we really enjoyed ourselves and had a great time getting together and camaraderie around the sport.
Tell your beautiful wife thanks for the pizza.
Yeah, she did good. Picked out some good ones. It was Hot Box. Shout out Hot Box. No, it was good stuff. So thanks for coming. Keith had to drive a couple hours. Dinwiddie, just about 30 minutes. So
yep,
worked out. No, thanks for coming.
Yeah, so jumping into the action from today's race, it was definitely an interesting one, but a lot of new things to take in. So what are your all's thoughts?
Dinwiddie have it, or I can go. I don't care. Whichever one.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to start with that lap 1 accident. You know, it looked like everybody got through turn 1 pretty clean. I think there was a little bit of, wide shoulders, but or big shoulders, but coming out of 3, we don't know exactly what happened there. I know that, it looked like somebody got booted from behind, and then we had the incident with Foster and Siegel and Power, and the 3 of them getting knocked out right away. When it's first race of the season, that's not the way you want to get things started. And 2 young guys, especially, they need experience, and so to get knocked out that early in the first race, and then obviously Will, he's a championship contender. He pretty much year in, year out. So him going out there, that really stunk for him. But just looked like, I don't know exactly what happened there. A lot of cars in a short or a small area, and that's what tends to happen in those situations. So, but after that, it was pretty smooth. So,
I mean, the 3 of us are nowhere near race car drivers, but you have one veteran who is chomping at the bit, driving for his career, in Will, like Gannett or Pinsky said, "Hey, we're not resigning you yet." And then you have 2 young kids who have hardly any experience, and that's the way their first lap went down. Like how heart-wrenching would that be for on both ends of the spectrum? Like, holy moly, Siegel and Foster really want to. I mean, if nothing else, just get laps. And Power is like, "No, I'm going to the front." So.
Siegel made that comment earlier this week, and I can't remember if it was in practice or qualifying that they were kind of telling the story that last year, in those limited events that he had, he was so concerned about, if I wreck this car, that's the end of my IndyCar career. And so, does he still feel that way after lap 1 on race 1? Does he have to take it a little more careful now, moving forward for the next several races, or
Sure.
Does he feel secure in that ride?
And that was the only yellow the whole race, right? The big one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really the only time he saw much of a mess at all. I mean, a couple times you saw some guys have some close brushes with the wall, but I think it's just hard driving. But how much did the tires impact?
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on. Going into it, watching the practice and the quals, the reds, which are technically the greens, everybody was talking about how effective or non-effective, or how fast they're going to fall off. So that impacted the race for sure. But going back to the wreck, it was a huge decision on lap 1 if you were on greens or you're on the primary. So the alternates of the primaries, I thought. My thought would be to go with the alternates at first. It's first race of the season. Guys are itching. That first turn's a little bit hairy anyway. Like, if you have to run those alternates, which you do, if there is an accident, first lap, let's get off of them. You got to run them. They're only going to last. I think Scotty Mack ran 15 on them. And so that was, I mean, going into it, pretty big component of that race. And that's a huge factor of why things ended the way they did, just because of the tire strategy.
Listening to the pre-race show on the radio, driving down to your house, Pat, and I know they had talked to Colton Herta, and he was surprised that of the front runners, the first 6 or 8 drivers, that he was the only one that was starting on reds, and that was a shock to him because he expected everybody to be that way. And, ultimately, like, it did turn out in his favor. And, then it put him at the front. And then, that poor kid, like, it just seems like he's snake bit, right? Like, he's got ready jinx for some reason that has bitten, so many others. Like, he's always got, like, so many times he's had the best car and the fastest car, and then something on pit road or in the crew or a strategy call tends to bite him, and
or he hits the wall by himself. Like, it's just he's. I think I told you two both. Like, we didn't talk about Herta at all last podcast, and I'm like, and he was second last season. He's still obviously big championship contender, but man, that stuff happens that had nothing to do with him. But yes, he hits a wall when he's leading the race and he's got to do it.
Yeah, as far as other drivers go, some noteworthy things. Guys that moved up big time in the pack. I gotta always shout out my boy Pato, making up 12 spots, I believe, from his starting position, and Rossi as well, both in the 10 and 11 spots where they rounded out today's event.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Ward. I think you really have to give him kudos because he had that cut tire, which probably happened on that lap 1 accident. And so, like, he had to run more sets of the alternate tires than other people because of that happening. And so, for him to end up where he did, that was those are the types of races that win you championships down the line, because you instead of finishing 25th, you finished 11th or 12th or wherever he was.
No, it's huge. I mean, a really crappy day to start for Ward. Rossi, I mean, he still has to produce, I think. And I think that's a good 10th for where he's come from on a good average Carpenter racing team. A 10th in those circumstances, I would take it if I was Rossi right now. An oval, you need to be, top 5, but I think it's a good 10th, solid, good. A lot of shifting going on in that race, so I would take that award for sure. Rossi, yeah, we'll take that 10th for sure.
Yeah. And so, besides the obvious top 2 finishers, who else you guys got that went out and had themselves a day?
Well, talking about power, obviously he got back into Siegel, but it was never. I still want to know what happened, maybe from behind him, or if Power there was no coverage on it. Not saying Power's at fault or not at fault, but holy smokes, you don't hit the wall that hard, in my opinion, without getting some help from the back. You think they would show that, but he was. I'm guessing he probably declined interview. I looked on every piece of social media, every IndyCar piece, just to see if there was anything from Will Power on what happened, and not a bit. So Siegel guy.
That makes me lean one way, Pat, because we all know that when Willie feels wronged, he lets everybody know it, right? Like,
very good point.
I think about Gateway last year, and the other times when Dixon has run into him. Yeah. So it's unusual for Willie not to say something. So I got a feeling he knows where the fault lies.
It was, even if it was still just wasn't covered, which I thought was interesting in the whole grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I don't know where the final, standings were and where people exactly finished, but the guy who was the last guy signed to a contract, Renus VK, we know that Renus is fast, and we know Renus has a lot of talent. He's a young guy. Dale Coyne has not had much success in the last few years, and for Renus to come out today and without, some fluke happening to put himself up and, where he was today. I don't know if he was in 10th to 12th in that area. Like that was an impressive drive for a guy like Renus to take a car that, I mean, let's be honest, it's as Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods used to say, a little inferior equipment, and put it up there. So that was an impressive drive out of him today.
That's a big asterisk on my notes. Is VK, I think, was probably top performer. Dale Coyne's always had, the newer guys and inferior equipment, as Dinwiddie said. Renus knows how to get around the track and can do it. So I mean, a ninth place out of that team, kidding me? I mean, tell me the last time Dale Coyne been in top 10. I mean, I don't know, but it's probably been a while. So no,
I think this is a great time as well to plug. If you're a newbie like me, just trying to get onto this sport and figure out some things, a road course like today is still pretty overwhelming for me to keep things and track things and understand what's happening at all times. But there are some good outlets out there. And it's similar to what we're hoping to do, which is to give you like some small digestible information. A great place to start is the NTT IndyCar app. They got a lot of good articles on there, nothing too overwhelming. Some good pieces too, just about individual drivers. But then the teams, if you follow their social media accounts, they're very open with a lot of things they do throughout the week, a lot of things through the qualifications and practices. The drivers are constantly on there as personalities to some degree, but also speaking directly about the race and about the potential strategies that might be utilized. So, those are things that as a new fan, it definitely makes the experience that much better and gives you a greater understanding of what's happening.
Today's was confusing for the three of us in some aspects. We, on the pit strategy and the tire strategy, we had to ask each other questions on who is where, what is happening, especially after that first stint. I mean, Scotty Mack was, light years ahead of everybody, it seemed. And after the first couple of pits, it seemed like, Scotty Mack still was going to dominate. Things changed. So, but to your point, Keith, the three of us were still like, well, he has to pit and then he has to pit. And then it all kind of, it does come together, but huge outlets. I think there's a few podcasts out there that can help, and just, even brief reads like you mentioned on the series app would help.
And then the other thing that's really noteworthy in this race as well, it made for a more exciting finish, is that those guys that are on the lead lap at the back of the pack do not have to forfeit their space. And, that allowed Dixon to close in on Palou. He and Newgarden both, allowed to put some pressure on them towards the end, which made for some more exciting races as the laps tipped away.
And Fox did cover that aspect of it. Buxton did, which is different than F1. I'm not trying to mix things up, but there are a few nuances in that aspect. And a lot of those situations came into play today if you're a first time IndyCar follower. A lot of those situations came into play today.
Yeah, Pat, you mentioned Scotty Mack. I think talking about McLaughlin a little bit, like I think we could all agree he had the best car today. And that's the great thing about IndyCar too, is any given week anybody can win. And you mentioned F1, like Max Verstappen's got the best car. He's going to go out and he's going to win week in, week out. Whereas here, Scotty Mack, just because of, we've got the tire differences, we've got, some things in strategy and things like that. Well, he drove as good a race today as he possibly could and still came home fourth. That's and that's okay. And he's okay with that because he knows how competitive it is. And, they made a gamble at the start to go on those primaries and it didn't pay off, and that's okay. I think we need to shift gears though and talk about who did win this thing. Like the fact that once again, here we go. Like we talked about him like 3 out of the last 4 years. He's the champion of the series and he always seems to find his way to the top. Like here's Pillow, and right behind him is Scott Dixon. And
the three of us were watching the race, and I don't know if we really ever mentioned Pillow. We're like, oh, well, here comes Newgarden, Scotty Max on this. Oh, Herta just crapped the bed in the pits. And then all of a sudden, Pillow's winning the race. We're like, well, race is over, right?
Yeah, here comes that yellow DHL car. And also,
it was
the pylon.
Yeah, we all chuckled. We're like, oh, crap, there he is. Like, I'm pretty sure we did not mention him as at least a serious contender there until he did. Thankfully, I mean, yeah, he went on to win it, but it did get a little bit interesting there with Stingray Rob holding up the line, and then Newgarden catching up to Pillow. So, I mean, I was kind of mad at Stingray there for a little bit, like get the heck out of the way. But then I was like, okay, let's make this a little bit of a race. So,
but if you think about your, those of you that are new to the sport, like manufacturers play a big role in this. And so Stingray is in a Chevrolet, and so is Newgarden sitting in second place. And
you made a really good point.
If Stingray is in a Honda, he's probably moving out of the way. But because he's in a Chevy, there's a little bit of teamwork going on. Even though they're not on the same race team, there is some teamwork between manufacturers there. So that happens. And then I mentioned Dixon briefly, and I don't know, those of you that don't pay us close attention as maybe the three of us do. I listened to the radio post race, and there was an interview with Dixon where he mentioned that he didn't even have radio communication with his crew, with his just all race. Like, I mean, how amazing is this guy? Like, we know he's a 6-time champion. He's done everything in the sport, but to not have any communication with pit road and ended up second place. But he even mentioned that, we saw that Pillow came in a lap before Dixon for that last stop, and that's what ultimately allowed him to leapfrog Scott. Scott said that his crew went up at the same time Pillow did, but they had no way of communicating that to him. And so, like, that could have been another Dixon victory. But once again, it's Barry Wanzer on Pillow's car and Mike Hole on Scott's car that just tend to get them to the front.
You texted that Dixon didn't have communication, so that I watched the post race, and Dixon's had a little bit of a tick, like, I'm kind of mad in this. So yeah, I mean, he flat out said, he's like, if I would have pitted a lap earlier, I would have won the race. So,
that's a what could have been frustration.
Yeah,
coming through.
Well,
but only a guy with his pedigree could finish second under those circumstances.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I texted one of the Pillow's pit crew guys about it. I was like, hey, congratulations, awesome. And I texted him about the Dixon thing. He's like, yeah, I had no idea. I was like, nobody did. Like, the newscast didn't know, the broadcast didn't know. Like, so pretty crazy to come home second with, I mean, not knowing how much push to pass you have, not knowing your strategy, obviously, not knowing how far Newgarden is behind or ahead or behind. So pretty awesome, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did see on one of the socials where someone was asking, it was a newer fan that they're new to IndyCar, and where would you rate this race on a scale of 1 to 10? I think they were trying to gauge, what they'll see in the future races. What is this comparable to St. Pete on a normal year, or what are races in the future have to offer that maybe this one doesn't? So, for my limited experience, I'd say probably for St. Pete, it's probably right there in the middle. A lot of people were saying, this is probably a 4 or 5. There was some excitement. There were some nuances with the new tires. And then some people were trying to kind of explaining what you might see in future races, road courses and ovals.
Yeah, I think that question kind of goes to, how casual or in-depth a fan you are, because I know for the three of us, that was a pretty exciting race. And I'd probably put it in that 7 range out of 10, just because of following the strategies. But if you're a casual fan who's looking for a lot of side-by-side on-track passes, bumping and crashes and things like that, if you're that kind of fan, I could see where today would be in that 4 category. But over the course of today's race, there were probably 7 or 8 guys that we felt at one point could win the race. And, that bumps it up as well.
Yeah, it's not an oval race where you can see these guys make these passes. Strategically, it's a strategy race, man. So it's really hard. It's not follow the leader. It's these guys aren't passing each other going into turn 1 to turn 9. There wasn't much passing, but it all came down to those strategies, which is exciting because for us, or for me at least, because there are 3 or 4 different situations where you didn't know who could win.
Right. Well, and that goes back to our last episode, our prediction episode, and I was the one that said it, like qualifying is so important because you want to have track position. Well, kudos to Firestone and IndyCar for putting tires together today that made that not as important because, the strategy played more of a role than where you qualified.
I think Dixon said it. He was like, you want degradation on these tires for the racing aspect, for the strategy aspect. If you didn't, then it'd be the worst race ever.
Yeah. Good point.
So Fox, got the big move from NBC to Fox. This was the first big event. We all agree build up to the event has been tremendous. Grading out Fox, one thing, I'll go ahead and start, but I think they did things well. I think it was good, and especially for work, first week's work. It was an enjoyable race to watch. I thought they did a good job. The coverage on F1 and F2 practice qualifying, the coverage was tremendous. I got to give them an A- just because, brand new season for them, them representing Indy Racing. I say it's a win.
Yeah, mine's not quite as high as an A-. My biggest beef compared to NBC was the qualifications, just the telemetry, that pylon of the green and the red, and knowing where somebody is, he's 0.36 seconds behind or ahead of the leader. Super, super, super hard to follow. Hinch, whoever got done would be like, oh no, he's on the pole. I'm like, 5 seconds after he crossed the start finish line. So not to say that they're not going to fix it, work on it, obviously. So quals was my biggest disappointment. I think overall the broadcast is great. I think it takes me personally getting a little bit used to of hearing Will and Hinch and Townsend in the booth, but that's just a personal preference. And then I think the push to pass, I don't think that, I'm sure I know Hinch at one point said it, but almost a new series to Fox, like a little bit more education on the push to pass. And the hybrid this is their first full season with the hybrid car. I don't know if the hybrid car was mentioned at all. So pretty big point I thought that they missed. But overall, a B plus ish type of thing for me. Probably me just being a little bit too big a pain in the butt about the stuff, just what I like.
Yeah, I think I'm in that B category as well. I like Will Buxton, and I think that Hinch and T-Bell have that, relationship. I thought Townsend was a little too dominant today on the broadcast. I thought he was trying to control it a little more than what I would have liked. And I don't know that their chemistry is there, but it was race 1. Some things I was really impressed with, though. I was really impressed with the graphics and the visuals. I think that they've put a lot of work into that. I love the drone piece. I love the drone views, especially on a street course, because you can see kind of the speed. I think you get a better idea of the speed as you're going into corners, and then the spacing, what the intervals are between cars. And I love how they're highlighting the drivers. When they did the intros, you were seeing the faces. They did they had some segments in there pre-race and during qualifying and practice this week about the drivers individually and their experiences. And then the city, I think the city of St. Pete has to love this, this week, because it really showed off the city. And I hope that continues as they move from place to place to give an idea of that area and the track and kind of some history at each place. I thought they did a really good job of highlighting that, maybe better than what NBC's done in the past.
Yeah, 2 points. The graphics, I think, were awesome. It was like the NFL. Like, you could see these guys, like, I am Tony Romo, quarterback, Dallas Cowboys. Like, you would see his face, you'd see everything. It was awesome. They did that for every driver, which I think is huge. And 2, the whole St. Pete thing, remember, they had a hurricane. There was a piece before the show of Pato and a city official, like, you guys just had a hurricane. Like, how hard was this? He's like, man, the community, like, and we killed it. We all came together and can still put on this race with almost really not even knowing that they had a hurricane just a few months ago. So, I mean, kudos to St. Pete. 3 of us always talk about going down there. We got to stop talking about it and actually do it. But no, it was a cool piece on Pato going down there with the St. Pete officials. So super cool.
I do think that IndyCar and Fox are doing the right thing by selling the drivers. I mean, I think that's what people get drawn into at first, more so than selling the sport. Take the helmet off. We talked about it in one of our previous episodes. Let us get to know these people. If you go to a race, it's pretty impressive how approachable they are and the access you're given. And so for me, that's what drew me in right away. Seeing the drivers, hearing them talk to you, speaking to crew members, and the accessibility and that personal piece. So I think they're right on by going with let's sell the drivers, especially to people that are already deep into the sport, and then they'll come to the sport. So I think they're doing the right thing there. And we're going to switch gears just a little bit, head on to our fantasy standings. We're going to have an episode later on this week that delves into fantasy a little bit more. But we did have some people join us. We appreciate those folks that did join us on our fantasy league. We invited on all of our socials and left links in our episode posts. So
it's not too late to join.
Yeah, it's not too late to join. If you're still interested, they're up. But Brian, do you have the app up, or
I can pull it real quick?
All right.
We don't need to.
Yeah, Pat was reluctant to have this segment because
there's a reason Keith wants to. So Scott, Dime Life 27, is in first place after today's race with 671 points. His value of his team also went up $2.8 million. So that's pretty impressive.
That's
Keith
a win.
And I,
that's a win.
Yeah, that's a win on both sides. Keith and I both end up in second and third then. And both went up. Everybody went up in value today, I believe. Even Pat's team, I think, even went up in value.
We're working on it.
But yeah, so those are the top 3 right now. And then Beef and Noodles, Truly Light, Liquid Johnny's Racing, and the Double Birds 12 was at the bottom today. But I know they'll bounce back. They actually made $1.3 million.
It's interesting. It's still confusing to me, and I've read all the rules. I've watched all the videos. You can still be not very good in fantasy, but still gain dollars, and you want to gain dollars. So you can choose better players. So that's to me, that's the interesting point of what's the threshold. So Keith, I think, didn't score many dollars, but he's at the top tier of the actual fantasy points, which is where you want to be ultimately.
Yeah. I got saved today by VK. I made a last minute switch before the race today and threw VK in and got Ilot out of my lineup. And I think his value went up $2.5 million today because of that performance that we already talked about. So,
and Pat and I learned a valuable lesson that you can change your lineup after qualifications.
Yeah. We didn't know that either.
Loophole.
Switched it 20 minutes ago. What the hell are you talking about? You're like, typically I thought it was like after qualifications, but no. So
right up until race time.
No, which is fine. It's cool that it's a little bit different. It's definitely cool.
All right. Does anybody else have anything good for the episode?
No,
I think we scratched. I think we scratched all the itches. We got to everything. I think it
I
was
think
it
we're
was a
good.
good race. Good race all around.
Good opening race. Yeah, like especially for strategy. Get a couple of thermal will be different. We'll see how that goes. It's an actual road course, not a street course, so those tend to be a lot different. A lot of more follow the leader type of thing. So, well, we can touch on that later.
Yeah. No, overall, I thought today was good, and I appreciate you, Pat, hosting today and being able to get together and see you guys face to face, and that's always good. So, very good day.
We've gained some traction on our podcast. You know, we were hopeful that we would get a handful of listeners on our first 2 episodes, but we got off to a pretty good start. You know, we're pushing 100 on a couple of the views on different outlets. So stick with us. It's going to be a fun season. It's only going to get better and better each time. So join us for the ride because we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, send some feedback. Let us know what we're doing, what we're not doing. You know, what do you want to hear about?
Yeah, I'm updating. I got a new camera. You can actually see me now. I got a little microphone up here. So no, we're in it to win it. So we hope you guys and gals enjoy it. Critique us if you want to get on it with us. All the above. We're here to have fun, talk about some IndyCar. So thanks for listening and watching. We appreciate you.
All right. That's it for episode 3. Thanks for tuning in to Checkered Shorts.